Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. Buckle up, because today we're going back in time, way back, to ancient Israel. We're talking tribal showdowns, larger-than-life leaders, and a whole nation grappling with, well, freedom. But this isn't just another history lesson.
No, not at all.
We're going deep, deeper than the battles and the victories, into the book of Judges.
Right. We're looking for what it tells us about building a nation, about leadership, even about ourselves today.
Exactly. I mean, you've got to admit, it's a period packed with, well, moral gray areas.
And some dilemmas that feel shockingly relevant even thousands of years later. You might know a few of the stories, but trust me.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much more to discover beneath the surface.
I like that, beneath the surface. Okay, so let's set the scene for our listeners. We're post-Joshua, the promised land is finally within reach.
Right.
But things, well, they aren't exactly a walk in the park, are they?
No, not quite. Imagine this. You inherit a land, but it's not this neat and tidy package.
Right.
It's more like a jumbled mix of different people, different cultures. The Israelites, fresh out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Now they have to carve out their own identity, govern themselves. It's a time of a trial and error, lots of it.
Lots of it.
And that's where the book of Judges comes in.
Okay, got it. So one thing that jumps out at me from Judges is this recurring pattern. Almost like a roller coaster, you know,
I see that.
ups and downs of faith.
Yeah.
And, well, let's just say some questionable decisions along the way.
Right.
So what's with that? Why this back and forth?
Ah, yes, the famous cycle of struggle. You could almost call it a blueprint for what not to do when you're building a nation. See, the Israelites, they stray from their covenant with God.
Uh-huh.
They get pulled in by the ways of the Canaanite tribes around them. Think of it like giving into peer pressure, even when it means compromising your values.
Oof. Yeah, I think we've all been there at some point. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
Not just individuals, but whole groups, even societies sometimes.
Right, exactly.
But, okay, so they mess up, they stray. Does God just wash his hands of them?
Well, there are consequences, that's for sure. Oppression from their enemies, internal conflicts, a sense of losing their way, their purpose.
Yeah, right, a real identity crisis.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting.
Oh.
In their distress, they cry out to God. It's almost like hitting rock bottom is what forces them to look up again.
So it's not just punishment, it's more like this chance to get back on track.
Exactly. And that's where the judges come in.
Okay, so tell me about the judges.
These figures, they're often pretty unconventional themselves. They're flawed, but they're raised up by God to deliver the Israelites from their enemies, bring back a time of peace and, prosperity.
Okay, so everyone learns their lesson, and it's happily ever after.
Well, I wish it were that simple. The book is honest about the cyclical nature of their struggles. They fall back into old habits, make the same mistakes, and the whole cycle starts all over again.
So they're just doomed to repeat history. What's the takeaway here, especially for someone listening who's going through their own challenges? What are they supposed to get from this cycle of failure?
It's not about despair, it's about recognizing a very human pattern. The cycle, with its falls and its moments of redemption, highlights the Israelites' journey, a journey of growth, of self-discovery. Every mistake becomes a potential turning point.
So it's not about never messing up, it's about what you do after you mess up.
Exactly. And it actually connects directly to something we were given, emphasizing the message of hope woven throughout the book. It's a powerful message. Even when we fall, we can always rise again. The cycle itself, it shows us something. Mistakes are opportunities for learning and for growth.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's kind of like we fall so we can learn to pick ourselves up. It's actually encouraging to see that even the so-called chosen people struggled with this.
Right. It makes it relatable.
It does. It does. Okay, so let's get into some specifics. Let's talk about these judges. Each one seems to embody something different, offer unique lessons. There are a few who really stand out from what we were given. Who should we start with?
Let's begin with Othniel.
Okay.
The very first judge after Joshua. He's like the model, setting the bar for leadership in this really turbulent period.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. So what makes Othniel stand out? Why him?
His story, it's all about rising to the challenge. He leads with faith and courage, showing that even after a time of decline, renewal is always possible. His victory, it's a powerful symbol. Even when things seem bleak, there's always the possibility of a fresh start.
That's a powerful message, especially if you're feeling stuck, discouraged. What about those who aren't, warriors?
Yeah.
What kind of leadership does the book of Judges offer for them?
Well, look at Deborah.
Yeah.
a prophetess and a judge. That was incredibly rare back then. She represents a different kind of leadership,
Yeah.
based on wisdom, spiritual insight.
So it's not just about physical strength, right? It's about drawing on other sources of power.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is how she teams up with Barak, the military commander.
Oh, right.
Together, they're this power duo, showing how important it is to collaborate, to use different strengths to achieve a shared goal.
That reminds me of something we saw. The idea that working together, helping each other, actually leads to greater success. It reinforces that the Book of Judges isn't just about individual heroes, it's celebrating collective action, shared responsibility.
You got it. It's a message that still rings true.
Yeah.
Think about any successful effort, a movement, a company, even a family.
Yeah.
It thrives on cooperation, on shared purpose.
Okay, so we've got Othniel representing courage, resilience, Deborah showing us wisdom, collaboration. Who's next in our lineup of judges?
All right, so let's move on to another judge, Gideon, a man, full of doubts and insecurities.
Oh yeah, Gideon, he's a memorable one.
But still chosen by God to lead Israel against the Midianites.
Yeah, isn't he the one who kept asking for a sign with the fleece? Not once, but twice.
Wait, that's him.
What's the lesson there? Besides, maybe don't be indecisive.
It's an interesting story, isn't it? To me, the fleece represents something we all struggle with at times.
Okay.
That need for reassurance before taking that leap of faith.
Right. Okay.
Gideon's story, I think it teaches us that even the most ordinary people
Yeah.
can be called to leadership, despite their doubt.
Oh yeah, it's like you don't have to be perfect to lead. In fact, maybe the imperfections make you a better leader. Relatable, Exactly. And his story also highlights those internal struggles, right? He had to confront idolatry within his own family before leading the Israelites against an external enemy.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that part. So it's like get your own house in order before you try to fix the world. Exactly. It shows that true leadership often begins with looking inward, taking responsibility for our own actions, our own spheres of influence before trying to change the world. And this actually ties into something from our source material about how each of us can be a judge in our own lives.
Oh, interesting.
Taking responsibility for our actions, making choices that lead to positive change.
I like that. It's a very empowering message, especially for anyone who's trying to make a difference, whether it's in their own community or workplace, or even just their family. It's not always about these grand gestures,
Right.
It's about the small, consistent actions that can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. Speaking of powerful messages, let's talk about Jephthah, his story. It's a cautionary tale.
Oh yeah, Jephthah, his story's a tough one.
About rash decisions and the weight of promises.
Yeah, that vow he makes.
He makes this vow to God that has these tragic consequences,
Right.
highlighting really the need for careful consideration and
Yeah.
thinking about the potential ripple effects of our choices, that our actions have consequences.
It's a sobering reminder that good intentions don't always equal good outcomes. It makes me think we really need to weigh our words, our actions carefully, especially when emotions are running high. How do we reconcile Jephthah's faith with such a, devastating outcome?
Jephthah's story is complex, for sure, and there are different interpretations. But for me, it underlines that even those chosen by God aren't exempt from making, really serious errors in judgment. It's a reminder that faith doesn't shield us from the consequences of our actions,
Yeah,
but hopefully it gives us the strength to navigate them.
right. It definitely adds another layer to this idea of being a judge. It's not about being perfect,
Yeah.
but it's about learning from our mistakes
Yeah.
and striving to do what's right, even when we fall short.
Yeah, good point. And that leads us to maybe the most famous or infamous judge,
You think I know what you're going to say?
Samson. Blessed with, superhuman strength.
Samson, the strong man.
But he's a figure of contradictions, capable of amazing feats, yet prone to giving in to temptation, making impulsive choices.
Classic tragedy, right?
Yeah.
He's got this incredible gift,
Incredible gift.
but it's his weaknesses that bring him down in the end,
It's like a commentary on human nature itself.
isn't it?
And I think it speaks to that idea from our source material. Good leadership. It's based on values, responsibility, not just strength.
Yeah. Samson, he had the strength, but not the character or the wisdom to really use it well.
Right.
It makes you wonder, are we all capable of that kind of downfall? Do we all have Samson moments,
That's a great question.
where our weaknesses, they kind of overshadow our strengths?
And I think it's something the book of Judges really pushes us to consider. Samson's story, it's a warning about self-control, the dangers of pride, and the need to stay true to our values,
Yeah.
even when we're tempted to stray.
So it's not just about physical strength, it's about building that inner strength too. The strength to resist temptation, to make good choices, to hold on to our values.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really crucial point. While the book focuses on these individual judges, their stories, they're not just isolated incidents. They're connected by something deeper.
What's that?
A set of core values that form the foundation of the Israelite nation.
So beyond all the battles and betrayals and drama, there's a bigger message about the kind of society they were trying to build.
Absolutely. And these values, they still resonate today, like the importance of faith in God, not just as a religious belief, but as a source of strength, guidance in times of uncertainty.
Right, yeah, like that recurring theme, crying out to God in their distress.
Yeah, exactly.
Even when they stray, there's this acknowledgement that they need something bigger than themselves.
Yes. And then there's the emphasis on true leadership. The judges who really make a difference, they're not just warriors. They're the ones who inspire their people, who embody those values, and lead with wisdom, integrity.
Reminds me of Deborah and Barak, combining their strengths, leading through collaboration. It's a timeless model of leadership.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we can't forget the value of cooperation. Time and time again, we see this. When the Israelites work together, using their different skills, they're able to overcome these seemingly impossible challenges.
Yeah. Speaks to that point from our source material about how working together, helping each other, leads to greater success. And that applies to everything, right? From personal relationships to tackling big problems in the world.
Right.
We're better together.
Absolutely. And finally, there's that crucial theme of resilience. The book of Judges, it's full of setbacks, failures, moments of despair. But it also shows how remarkable the Israelites were at picking themselves up, learning from mistakes, and continuing to strive for a better future.
Powerful message for anyone going through tough times. Setbacks, they're not the end.
No.
They can be opportunities to grow, to change, to come back stronger.
Exactly. And this leads us to that final verse in Judges. It paints a pretty bleak picture.
Oh, yeah?
In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Uh-oh. Sounds like a recipe for anarchy.
Yeah.
Is that the warning here?
Well, it might seem like a statement about individual freedom at first glance,
Yeah.
but I think it's a subtle warning about what can happen when a society doesn't have shared values, clear leadership,
Right.
a sense of collective responsibility.
So it's not just about what individuals do. It's about this system those actions happen within. A system built on shared values, ethical principles, answering to something greater than ourselves.
You got it. And I think that's the real challenge, both for the Israelites back then and for us today. How do we build a society that balances individual freedom with collective responsibility? How do we ensure that doing what's right in our own eyes doesn't lead to, well, chaos?
Those are big questions. And it feels like the book of Judges, it's giving us more like a framework for thinking about those questions than a set of easy answers.
You're absolutely right, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's not a book of, simple moral pronouncements. It's a nuanced exploration of human nature, the complexities of leadership, the ongoing struggle to build a just and thriving society.
Okay, so we've traveled through the cycle of struggle, looked at the different lessons each judge offers, uncovered those core values that really define the Israelite nation. But how does all of this connect to our listener today? How do we bridge the gap between ancient Israel and the here and now?
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Book of Judges.
All right, so we've been on this journey through Judges, talking about struggle, leadership, and resilience. But now I'm kind of thinking, how do we apply all this? Bring it into our lives today.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's shift gears a bit. From ancient Israel to, right here, right now, how can we learn from these judges?
Right.
These flawed but really interesting figures. How can they guide us in our own lives?
Well, we talked about that cycle of messing up and getting back on track, the importance of having those shared values, and how leadership isn't just for people in charge.
Right.
But I'm still trying to wrap my head around what it actually means to be a judge in my own life.
It's a big concept, isn't it?
It is a big concept.
Yeah.
But it's also empowering when you think about it. Remember, these judges, they weren't just warriors or kings.
Right.
They were ordinary people who stepped up, often even when they didn't want to guide their people through tough times.
Right. Okay.
And they lived out the values they wanted to see in their society.
So it's less about having authority over others and more about living by certain principles.
That's it.
Making choices that reflect those principles and hopefully inspiring other people to do the same.
Exactly. And those principles, we've seen how they're still relevant today. courage when things get tough, like Othniel,
Yeah.
leading the Israelites after all those years of oppression,
Yeah.
wisdom and collaboration, Deborah working with Barak,
Right.
the willingness to deal with your own problems before trying to fix everyone else's, like Gideon did with his family. That makes me think about something from our source material, about taking responsibility for what we do.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe being a judge in our own lives starts with seeing those moments when we can make a difference, even if it seems small or unimportant.
I think that's a really powerful insight. It's about noticing those judge moments in our everyday lives.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe it's speaking out against something that's wrong, even when it's hard, or being there for someone who's struggling, or just choosing to do what's right, even when no one's looking.
It's like those little acts of courage or kindness or just doing the right thing. We don't always notice them. But when a lot of people do them, it can really change things.
Exactly. And it goes back to the idea of working together, which is all over the book of Judges. Think about Deborah and Barak uniting those different tribes, or the Israelites rallying around Gideon in his fight against the Midianites.
Reminds me of that message. We're stronger together.
Absolutely. And I think the book of Judges also have this important message about resilience. The Israelites, they went through so much. Setbacks, mistakes, losses. But they also had this amazing ability to learn, to adapt, to come back stronger than before.
It's that cycle of struggle all over again. It's not about never failing. It's about what you do after you fall.
Right.
Do you stay down or do you get back up, learn from it,
Yeah.
and come back stronger?
That's it. And that's a message that's so powerful for us in our own lives. We all face tough times. We make mistakes. We have moments when we doubt ourselves or feel lost. But the book of Judges, I think it reminds us that we're capable of overcoming those things, of learning and growing from our experiences, and coming out of those tough times with a better understanding of ourselves and the world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big thing you hope our listeners take away from all this?
I hope they see that the book of Judges, it's not just some ancient story. It's a reflection of what it means to be human. It's a story of struggle, of resilience, and the power of those values. Faith, courage, cooperation.
Right. And in the end, it's a call to action for each of us to step into our own judgeship, to live by our values, and to help create a better world.
I like that. Well said. And to everyone listening, as you go about your day, your week, your life, think about what we've uncovered here. Embrace the challenges, learn from your mistakes, and never underestimate the power you have to make a difference, even in small ways. The book of Judges shows us that even in the midst of chaos, uncertainty, there's always hope, the chance to make things right, and the power to create a better future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
אז עד כאן להפעם חברים, תודה שצפיתם. מוזמנים לעקוב, לשתף וכמובן לפרגן ולשים לייק. להתראות בסרטון הבא.